days ago, actually on Valentine's Day, February 14th, I had a chance to sit down with artist Jeremy Vickery. And I wanted to make this little introduction just to help you get to know this guy if you're not familiar with him already. His experience professionally pretty much covers every production, everything I grew up loving as a child. He's worked for PIXAR, he's worked for Naughty Dog, he's worked for Ubisoft, Ben Studios as well. I have it over here. And I actually had to put it next to me because I can't remember everything this guy's worked on. Let me see. The Incredibles, Cars, Ratatouille, WALL-E, Brave, Inside Out, The Blue Umbrella, Toy Story of Terror, Assassin's Creed Odyssey, Uncharted Lost Legacy, Days Gone, to name a few. You know, you could do worse, right? He reached out to me because he learned about me through a mutual friend, Kelsey Rodriguez, who I've had a chance to sit down with myself, an amazing YouTuber herself. And I discovered as a result his YouTube channel, which is a little bit over a year old, called Light Ponderings. And I went to check it out and immediately knew, listening to him and watching his videos, something really big has landed in this this YouTube art community for us. Light Ponderings is probably one of my best. It immediately became one of my best channels out there. The way he teaches, the way he communicates, his experience, his kindness and compassion is something that resonates into his videos. And when I got a chance to sit down with him, we actually sat down twice together, because the first time we recorded a video together, I was in such bad shape. I asked him if we could re-record it because I was out of it. He graciously accepted. So thank you, Jeremy, for that again. When we sat down the first time, and reinforced by the second time we sat down together, I immediately realized I'm talking to an incredibly kind soul, a really warm-hearted person with a very kind and compassionate and very relaxed way of communicating. And listening to the way he teaches, looking at his expertise and his personality. When he announced that he was working on and very soon launching his own online art mentorship, being a fellow teacher myself, was extremely excited about this. I expect really big things, and the fact that he's contributing his own expertise to this world of online learning, along with the other amazing artists that we have, Ahmed Al-Duri, Clinton Diana Kearley, Tyler Edlin, Anthony Jones, Bobby Chu, and the list goes on. This really excites me on where the art community is going, and Jeremy is going to be a monumental contribution to this art community. So I wanted to kind of give you this little introduction just so you know who we're talking to. He's gonna kind of walk you through his own experience during the podcast itself, but I'm gonna shut up because I'm sure you want to listen to him and listen to our conversation where we talk about pretty much everything. So sit back, grab some popcorn, and enjoy. This is really, really exciting. So I'm really happy that I can promote it on my channel. I'm quite pleased, by the way. Thank you for doing me the honor of joining me on my channel, because
Well, it's an honor for me. We actually met through I was connected to you through Kelsey Rodriguez, another YouTuber who is just fantastic, and she was just so kind. She interviewed me last summer, and after talking with me, he's like, you need to talk with Adam. You and Adam are just gonna click. And then when you and I finally did connect, we're like, oh yeah, instant friends. This is cool. Very similar backgrounds, and similar passion for teaching and wanting to help people, and wanting to have peace in our own life of the crazy industry, and we just want to help people promote their own art and grow, and that's where there's a lot of joy. So I feel instant kinship there. So we've already agreed in our conversation earlier that if I'm ever in Montreal or you're ever in Atlanta, we're gonna get together and hang out, or wherever.
Absolutely.
I actually just want to promote a really interesting idea to you right now too. Is I was chatting with another couple of friends, and we're considering in the future, I don't know, next year or something like that, actually doing an art trip somewhere where we go and we paint and we go someplace really artistically impressive, Iceland, New Zealand, Antarctica, somewhere, and do it as an artist trip or something like that. Could be an idea, that is, it excites me. I love travel. And so,
And you know what? As much as I'm a very multinational focused person, right? I'm very emotionally open to the world. I have little to no traveling experience. I'm a very unseasoned traveler. I've been to New York City, I've been to Vancouver, and I've never been overseas. I've never been overseas in my life. I'm such a homeboy, it's ridiculous. So this would be a really awesome opportunity for me to
see. I've been to 47 countries, and so I've been all over. The only continent I haven't been to is Antarctica, and that's on my list of wanting to go someday. But it changes my view of the world and of people, and being able to get that perspective, and as an artist, it really helps me too. So it's one of those things that I think is awesome. And it also breeds, grace and kindness on people when suddenly you're the person who doesn't speak the local language and you're the one who has to change your customs to fit in. It's really healthy for the soul.
It really is. And it's something we take for granted too, is like as teachers, right? That I think maybe 3 or 4% of my students are English first language. And you take for granted that your students are adapting themselves to your language. They're adapting themselves to your ecosystem to accommodate you as a teacher. And you can't take that for granted, that they're not only learning something, but they're learning something in a language where they're not fluent in it. They're not speedballing through that, albeit art language is universal in most cases, but they're learning new terminology and they're learning new principles and doing so in a foreign language. When I taught at the college, I taught in animation for years. I was teaching exclusively in French, and it definitely improved my French quite a bit. I'm very comfortable teaching in French and stuff like that, but I was the fish out of water, and they embraced me and welcomed me into that community, which was a really lovely experience, so I respect that for sure. Yeah. You've realized, Jeremy, you've seen as many places on this planet. You've visited as many places on this planet as I've seen years alive on this planet. It matches my age perfectly. How about that?
Look at that. Yep.
And that's something.
Yeah, I've got you beat in the age by 1 year. I'm 48. So you can catch up in the next year, I'm sure. One more year and you'll have the even number of countries too.
That's very clever, Jeremy. Very nice. So where would you like to start with this? There's definitely hot button topics that are easy to get everybody worked up about. What a lot of people don't know is this is actually our second time recording it. But the last time my back was in such terrible shape, I'm leaning on the desk, and it was very distracting. So we decided to do it again. Thank you again for that, by the way, Jeremy.
Yes, you're welcome.
We touched on the topic of AI, although that's a very exhausted subject. We could definitely tap on that as well. But you actually had a couple of questions you had brought up before we started the call. Do you want to start with one of those, maybe?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, one of the ones, as somebody who is transitioning out of being in the industry for 25 years, I'm still in the industry, but I'm transitioning more into a full-time mentoring people and helping people with their art. One of the questions that often comes up that I see with students, is I'm stuck in my artwork and how do I get out? And I have my own opinions of like where people get stuck, where are the potholes where people can't get out of. And it's our job as teachers to try to help them and to inspire them and push them out of that. As somebody who has more experience as a full-time mentor and teacher, what do you think, are the common areas where people get stuck and how to help them out of it?
Right. Well, that's a good question. I've noticed, although everybody's got their own personal obstacles to deal with, I wouldn't include in this response, I wouldn't include things where with students with ADHD or certain type of learning differences, autism or things like that, namely because I don't consider that, from my perspective, an obstacle. I don't consider that an intrinsic obstacle or an extrinsic obstacle. I consider that something that I, as the teacher, need to adapt myself to as the teacher. That's not up to them. So I would exclude things like that. But I think if there's anything inherent in the person's own demeanor and their own approach, I'd say one of the main ones is resistance to input. And that manifests itself very often in a no, I know kind of response. Every single time you tell them anything, and I'm literally responding to what I'm seeing visually, and I'm saying, if you do this and that, and they go, I know, I know. Yeah, I know. And it's the yeah, I knows. I've already done it. Yeah, I already took Jeremy's class and I already took Bobby's class. I know all about this stuff. To which I very often will say, well, good. I'm glad you're aware of that. Now it's time to apply it because I don't see it yet. And they go, they get all defensive. But I don't mean to, I don't mean to put people in their place, but that can be an obstacle when people are resistant to instruction, when they're there to literally speak to an instructor. They're there for help, but there's this ego thing. I find that ego can definitely get in the way. The other thing that can be an issue is very often, and this is something that I worry about with students, when I think you're not going to make progress in a meaningful way and you're not going to get to that point if you don't acknowledge certain things. And one of the main things is, for whatever inherent reason, afraid to face the reality of what they're good at. And for instance, I've had students that would say, just giving an odd example, for instance, somebody would say, "Oh, I love to draw fairies. I want to work at Riot. I want to work at Riot Games. Riot Games it's in my city. I don't even have to move it." I said, "It's fantastic." And I look at the portfolio and it's full of fairies, good fairies, really skilled fairies. And I'll say, okay, well, if you want to work at Riot Games, we're going to have to look at what they do there, and we're going to have to adapt ourselves. Yeah, no problem. They come back the next week with more fairies and more fairies. And at a certain point, I say, you're a fairy illustrator. You're a children's illustrator. These are gorgeous drawings. They have nothing to do with Riot Games. You need to address that reality. You're in denial. And I could be talking to people that are in their 40s and 50s that are still in denial. And that to me, it's, if you're not willing to see yourself and acknowledge your passion and acknowledge the things that you're good at, because you think the industry is asking for something, you've already wasted decades of your life chasing after something you're not even willing to do, right?
Exactly.
So to me, it's embracing, it's not taking for granted the things that come naturally to you and embracing that. And as a teacher, I really make a focus on what that person's good at and what that person is passionate about, and really helping to push them in that direction. See, those are the two main obstacles that I tend to run into. I'm not sure about you. How about you?
I mean, I totally agree with that. I mean, I would add to it as well, perfectionism. Procrastination because of perfectionism is one of the things that I see the most. Is like, I would really love to learn to paint, but I'm afraid of it, so I don't do it. And so then you don't learn it. And then decades pass. And I know a lot of professionals in the industry who do tech art, and they really want to do traditional art as well. And they just never take the time because they're afraid of failing at the process. And I think recently I thought of a term that I kind of like. It's like playing is failing safely. And like, I think of tiger cubs when I see a nature video, and when they're young, they're tackling each other, and they just like, oh, they're so cute, they're playing, like, but they're learning to attack animals for their life, but it's a safe zone where they can do this with each other before they get trampled by an elephant. And I think that we need to give ourselves that grace to get through the perfectionism of going, I want to work at Riot, I want to work at PIXAR, I want to work wherever, and then just going, and my work isn't good enough, and not being willing to just get through the bad art until you get there, to be like, I just need to make art, and it's going to look bad for a while, and I'm slowly going to learn little things, and I'm just going to keep doing it because I know it'll lead to something. It's like, I'm not going to be Arnold Schwarzenegger by doing 2 push-ups. If you want something out of this, you're going to have to exercise, and that's definitely something I see.
Huge. That's a big deal. It's funny you're saying that too, because the better I got at art, the more, it's not, what you're saying isn't only important with regards to learning, it's important with regards to creating good art. It's pulling your ego and focusing on the message. And for instance, one of my favorite concept art books is for anything made by Brad Bird, who you incidentally worked with, right? One of my personal heroes. And you look at PIXAR art, you look at the Incredibles art, and you can tell that the artist, what I love about it is that the artist completely pulled their ego out of the equation. It's about capturing, like, for instance, Jack Attack, and doing all the storyboards for Jack Attack. And I can't remember the name of the artist, but the guy who did a lot of the character development actually developed the characters through the storyboarding. As he animated it, and as he came up with scenarios, their hairstyle started to come to shape. And he's saying that when you look at the way they're just trying to get that feeling out loosely, just impulsively, emotionally, just trying to get that feeling out and trying to capture the scene. And you look at the drawing and it's very rough.
Scribbles.
But it's rough, but it's fun. It's exciting. It's interesting. They're not sitting there trying to make everything look dope, right? That's after the fact. Once all that's been fleshed out, then you can figure out how to make things look really, really cool. And that attitude of perfectionism is something you have to let go of in order to create organic and believable artwork as well, because you're trying to capture humanity. You're trying to capture a natural world, not this clinical thing, right? So yeah, a hugely important point.
It's really interesting. Actually, you bring up something that you said earlier with the, students who are like, yeah, I get it. It comes down to me, at this age of life, I'm learning about vulnerability and midlife crisis zone and that type of stuff of going, what do I really want in life? Who am I as a person? Who do I want to be as a person? Not just what do I want to do? It's like, who do I want to be? And I think a lot of this comes down to vulnerability of just like, I'm going to have to be okay with accepting who I am. And I'm going to have to be okay with those hard emotions. And so in the art, that's what makes good art, is where you're on that edge of saying something really important, and important stuff is really, dangerous topics to be like, what are your thoughts on AI? What are your thoughts on, working 70 hours a week? What are your thoughts on balancing family life? What are your thoughts on relating to other human beings? And like pretty soon you're getting into this territory where it's very easy to go, yeah. Okay, I got it. I don't want to talk about that because I don't want to be seen as weak, because this is hard stuff. But that to me is where the arts thrive the best, where the best stories are. Like you have to set your ego aside, and it's just hard to do. I mean,
As Brad Bird would say, you slow down. You slow down at the moment of cringe. Right. He's talking about when he was doing a Family Dog, and he was talking about how he would animate the food coming out of the thing, and that's the uncomfortable scene when it's and this dog food, slowly starting to slide out, and it's like watching a poop. Like, but that's where it's happening. It's at the core of that. It's where you're hitting at the core of something, where it matters. And it's more often than not the stuff that we are trained to hide, right? I totally cut you off there, though. You were saying something.
Oh, no, that's totally fine. I mean, I guess it spurred another thought for me. See, this is where you and I just click. This is great. So I think when I think of people that have inspired me, Brad Bird definitely was my favorite director that I've ever worked with. And I've worked with a lot of different directors. And this is something we talked about the last time we chatted, and a good thing to bring up again. What I love about Brad is that he's able to lead, not only making amazing stories, but he really cares about the whole process and the people involved in it. So I've worked with a lot of directors who sit down to look at a shot, and they'll lean in and they'll look at the shot, and they'll be like, watch it several times and then say, fix this, fix this, fix this. And that's fine. It's decisive. It's good. It works. But what Brad would do is he would first, meet you and be like, hey, how's it going? And get to know you as a person. You relax a little bit. And you're like, okay, he's a human being. He's not just, this, famous person. He'd get to know your name or make up a nickname for you. And then he would look at the shots and he's like, wow, this is amazing. You know what would make it even more amazing? If we put more focus over here, it's going to make the story better this way. And he wouldn't give you specific notes. I mean, sometimes he would, but it wasn't so much about move this pixel, move that thing, rotate this object. It was the story needs this. And he would tell you the why. And so he would inspire you into what you needed to change. And so you go back to your desk and you're all hyped and excited and like, this is amazing. I can't wait to do this. Wait a minute. He just ripped apart all of my work and made me redo it. But I don't care because I have the vision for how much better it's going to be. He's sharing
his vision with you. Yeah.
Exactly.
He's sharing. He's not telling. Yeah.
That to me is the type of leadership that I aspire to, is to inspire people rather than just telling them what to do.
Yeah. You're helping to they created the momentum yourself. It's like a keto. You just help them pull that momentum in a certain direction, right? And just for pure curiosity's sake, the last time we spoke, you spoke about the sneaky way they came up with your nicknames at PIXAR. And then I can't remember what yours was specifically. How did that happen?
Yeah, so Brad called me Gerbil the whole time I was there, and it's really funny because when my wife and I got married long time ago, she took a nickname, Elex is the Latin word for Holly, and her name's Holly. And
Right.
my, Jeremy, and we made an email address. This is way back in the 90s, before, it was a big thing. And so we just kind of smashed our names together into Germalex. And it sounded just kind of weird. It sounds like some sort of cleaning, agent or some, something, Listerine, something like that, or some sort of drug or whatever. But anyhow, it just kind of stuck, and I had that for years. And so when I joined PIXAR, they said, oh, well, Jeremy at Pixar.com is already taken. Do you want to just do your login as Germalex like you already have on your email? I'm like, sure. But what I didn't realize is that people call each other by their login names, not by their real names most of the time, because you just see there's 1,200 people, at least when I was there. And so everyone knows you by your login name. So everyone called me Germalex, and the whole lighting team knew me as Germalex. So when I got to that first review on The Incredibles with Brad, he was like, Gerbil, what? You're Gerbil. That's it. And that's what he called me. The rest, I worked with him on Ratatouille as well. And, that was my nickname. And he had nicknames for pretty much everyone in the studio.
And he remembered them all.
He remembered them all.
He's one of those jerks that remembers your name and you can't remember. Hey, he's the boss. You're like, oh, crap.
Yeah, that was amazing. Oh, so for the people on this channel who don't know who I am, I have worked for 25 years in the film industry and in the games industry. I worked at PIXAR for almost 8 years. Incredibles, Cars, Ratatouille, WALL-E, Brave, Inside Out, as well as several short films, The Blue Umbrella, Toy Story of Terror, Jack Jack Attack.
You did Jack Jack Attack. Oh,
I did. I worked on Jack Jack Attack. That one was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And then I worked in the games industry. I worked on Assassin's Creed. I worked on Uncharted. I worked on Days Gone. And then I came back to film, and I worked in television and in virtual production. So I worked on Westworld. I worked on, I'm not sure if I can even say it yet, a huge series for Amazon that's coming out at the end of this year or early next year, at some point, that's in post-production.
You're still hush hush?
Yeah, I don't know. It's been announced, but
okay,
I'll have to wait a couple of months until it's more official. But it's for Amazon. It's it's based off of a very popular franchise. So anyhow, I have a lot of experience. I was a freelance concept designer and illustrator as well for several years, and worked for clients like Lego and Disney and Sony and Ubisoft and a lot of different companies around the world, advertising agencies and stuff. So I have a lot of variety, in a lot of different companies, from working for myself as a freelancer all the way up to like PIXAR size with 1,200 people, Ubisoft with 10,000 people, and just kind of all over the place, mostly focused in on lighting, but also in lighting, color, and illustration. So there's
that's your main passion. Yeah,
it is. Yeah.
So basically, no big deal. You've done a few things. Yeah. And you tie it all together, and you're also a nice guy, which to me matters. But that didn't jade you. That didn't turn you into some elitist jerk. You're actually very sweet, which just makes me
wait to get to know me more. No, just kidding.
Yeah. And then he smiles like, uh-oh, maybe I spoke too soon. But so that's basically, you've worked on pretty much everything that I've loved over the last several decades. So that's
something that's also, I think, an interesting topic for someone of like your and my age level and experience in the industry, is imposter syndrome. It's like, I feel it all the time. I'm still always like,
every day, all the time. Yeah.
Is my stuff going to be good enough? Is somebody going to be like, when I started my YouTube channel last year, it's been a year almost exactly this week when my first video came out, and I was like, I don't know if people are going to like this or not. I'll just put it out there because some friends wanted to see, like, how do I paint, how do I draw, what do you see, what do you think? And instead of me replying in an email to every single person who writes and says, how do I become a lighting artist, how do I do illustration, I was like, I'll just make a YouTube channel and then I can send people there. And I constantly, every time I'm making a new video, I'm like, is this going to be the one that everyone's like, I'm like, so far it's not, but still feel it all the time.
It's funny you're saying that too. I don't know where I heard it. It was very recently. I was watching a video talking about stress and stage fright and imposter syndrome, and it played into that. And they were talking about how when you take the heart rate of a person who's just gotten on stage for the first time, the heart rate is very elevated. Their stress level is extremely high. If you take a heart rate of a seasoned celebrity who does 55,000 shows a year, the heart rate's exactly the same.
Interesting.
It's also elevated, but they've learned to get used to it, right?
Yeah.
And I think something that's happened with me over time is that I've just, once you've been in the industry for long enough, and for anybody listening, you will find yourself in that position where you've gained a very substantial career and stuff like that. I like to describe it as if you're a younger aspiring artist, you're us plus time. We're just you plus time basically. But you just get accustomed to the nerves. It's just a regular part of things. And when you're doing performances, I'm sure you've done many speeches, many performances, you've worked with many students. You're not any less insecure. You're not any less stressed. You're not any less worried about what people will think. You've just jumped into that deep end so many times that you've gotten used to the water. You've gotten used to the feeling of being in a stressful position, but you're not like, this is boring, I do it every day. No, it's always exciting. And it's always a bit nerve-wracking. So yeah, I think it matters a lot to people to hear you say that, particularly with your background, and when I make YouTube videos, or when I'm doing a presentation, or if whatever I'm doing, anything, I'm always concerned and I'm always worried, but I do it anyways. And I think that ties into a lot of people who I feel who are, just kind of segue a little bit, people who I find who are particularly successful, talking about like things that can hold up people's success. And it kind of ties into what I'm going to be recording, what I've recorded in this week's Art Talk is you have to put yourself, or at least accept the discomfort that comes with certain situations, right? And don't avoid the discomfort. And that more often than not, people who are hired to do certain things, people who do succeed, are the people who are willing to do things that other people either are afraid to do or make excuses not to do, right? And the fact that you're not necessarily any more qualified than anybody else, but you walked into that room, you did the action, and you gained the experience through that, right? Does that make sense?
Totally agree. I think it's funny. I think a lot of people that want to get into the industry, they think, I'll never get in. I'm not talented enough. I'm like, oh man, there are so many opportunities. It's so hard to find good people because you have to find the people that have the persistence to work through to get there. And once you find them, it's like, I don't know about your experience, but I once heard it's really crowded at the bottom and really empty at the top. And so if you want to be a lighting lead, if you want to be a concept designer or whatever, finding a really good one is hard. So once you have those skills, there's a lot of jobs out there that are available, but it just takes that. You got to be persistent. You got to push through and keep drawing and keep creating always. I love to sign my emails, instead of sincerely, I like going, keep creating, Jeremy. Just because it's one of those things that like keep on swimming. You just got to keep doing it, and you will be successful if you do it long enough. Anybody can do this. I mean, I don't actually inherently believe in innate talent. I do believe that there are certain mindsets that help people create, but I think it's just this reward system of you tried really hard, you did well, you got some praise, so you do it again. And because you've done it now twice as much, you're better at it, so you get more reward. And then suddenly people go, you're so talented. I'm like, well, I just put in the time.
And you're always living in the moment anyways. Like it's funny, you were talking about the fear of starting something new, right? And a lot of people are afraid to make a step because they're afraid of not being perceived as being great at something. And it's giving yourself permission to not be good, giving yourself permission to fail. And in that context, that ties directly into career paths and growth. And I find that one of the most exciting phases of learning, whether or not I'm picking up cameras or lighting or learning about astrophysics or anything, any subject that I'm passionate about. Notice that at the very, very beginning, before your ego gets involved, learning is always exciting. Like learning a new software, learning how to play with different microphones, learning stage setups, learning how to, set up a studio in a way that's actually balanced and looks pretty and all that kind of stuff. I'm walking into a subject, a complete newborn. I don't know what the hell I'm talking about, but because everything is so fresh and new, my ego hasn't gotten involved yet. And you look at this in kids, you look at, like, I remember watching, try not to go off on too many tangents. I remember watching a talk. I think it was a TED talk by Dr. Ballard, the guy who discovered the Titanic. I really love that guy, who incidentally my mother worked with. She actually worked. Yeah, really amazing guy. Wow. And he talks about he always addresses his most passionate talks to people who are too young to know any better. You know, one of the things he said that really made me care for the guy was he said, I would never hand the joystick to a $16 million deep sea submersible to somebody who hasn't played video games yet. I wouldn't trust it with an adult. I'm only going to hand it to that 9-year-old who's got at least 600 hours of video game experience. And it made all the kids' eyes light up in this thing. And it's that they're not at a point yet where they've categorized, they've pigeonholed themselves into some echelon, to some level of skill. They're just newborns passionate about a subject, and there's a direct connection between student and teacher, and they're going full force. And the more I gain skill artistically, the more experience I've gained, the more I love being a newbie, because that's where all the cool stuff happens. This is where all the discovery happens.
Yeah.
And all of those newbie experiences I have are honestly the things that help me grow as a professional the most. They tether to being an artist. I can listen to you and go, yeah, I get you. I can picture you sitting on the beach looking at the sun refracting off the water. And that's where you're taking me. So what you've done, just very much like what Brad's done, is you're creating a personal connection with that lesson. And those personal connections happen more often than not, the most, when you're very fresh. And as a professional, you have to keep going back to that early phase. As Richard Williams would say, artists, I was actually speaking specifically about animators. Animators are like children in the sense that they've never lost their ability to observe.
Observation is absolutely key, and curiosity. Both of those things for sure are huge in my career, of just taking the time to slow down and just look at things, and be like, what is actually happening here? What am I actually seeing? What is this? What is happening with this film? Why is this one better than that one? What is happening in nature? Why does this excite me and this one doesn't? And what are the themes behind it? And always being that sense of curiosity. I think I used to give tours at PIXAR all the time. And a lot of my fellow lighting artists are like, why do you do that? I don't understand why you would want to show people around and everything. And like, well, for me, there are times where this job is just really hard. You're in the technology and all this kind of stuff, and you're really into the brain part of it. And you're just like, oh, I'm just exhausted. And then I see somebody come in from the outside that's just like, this is the coolest job on the planet you ever had. I want to be here someday. And I get that like injection of that curiosity, that love of what we're doing. And it reminds me like, this is the coolest job. I can't imagine doing anything else. I loved art, and I continue to love art, and I love art more and more. And it's more of a mystery the more I learn it. Even though I understand it more, I realize just how big it is, and like the iceberg under the ocean. It's just like, this is just, it takes a lifetime to even just begin to grasp it.
Yeah.
So, it reminded me of
oh, sorry, go ahead, I cut you off.
One quote that I thought was really great, that it often comes to my head is, it's amazing what one can do when one doesn't know what one can't do.
So it's amazing what one can do. And yes.
When one doesn't know what one can't do, that's why student filmmakers, indie game makers, just do it. And don't listen to the voices that say, no, you can't do this. This is way too complicated. And it's amazing what you can do when you don't know what you can't do.
You're literally quoting Rodney Mullen verbatim. He was somebody who basically forged skateboarding, the foundations of skateboarding. And he forged it because he didn't have anybody sitting around him telling him how it was supposed to be done. He was just some country boy in his driveway, just working on moves and exploring. He was just playing with this board, with this thing as a toy, and learned cool different ways of flipping it around. And little did he know or care that one day he was going to end up being probably the most influential skateboarder of all time. And if you look at the way that kind of philosophy translated into his life, when he ended up having very severely messed up hips, right? Like to the point where you're going to be in a wheelchair in 2 weeks, Rodney, so it's time to hang up the skateboard. And if you hear the almost macabre story of how he grinded through and broke through all the sinew and muscle to get his hips moving again, he basically grinded his way to recovery. Not that I recommend anybody follow that, because I think he's got a bit of a horseshoe up his ass. But yeah, what you're saying too is important, because from a teacher's perspective, right? 99% of what I teach is personal experiences. I'm relating something that somebody said to a personal experience. And those personal experiences came when I sat down and observed.
Yep.
When I wasn't going straight to the source on Google, but when I was sitting down here beating my head against my sketchbook going, "Grr, grr, I can't get this thing to work." And that frustration, and then going, okay, and I had that it gave me a strong desire to work out a problem. And it's through that whole process of failure, right, that I forged method, I forged understanding. I made multiple different little side discoveries along the way that's what I tap into when I teach. That's what I tap into when I create art talks, right? And I can see that same quality, right? Yeah.
I mean, there is that thing there. When you've struggled through something, you know it so much better than when you do it well. So and with my students, I'm always like, okay, the point of this exercise is failure. Push yourself until you fail, because it'll stick. Trust me. You try the wrong way, and then you feel that, and then you try the right way. Oh, that's going to stick versus accidentally. Like, I'd like to make a video about accidental success. And, because I think it happens often where they're just lucky, and they just happen to hit it right the first time. And like, that's great. But, really experienced people know the mistakes and the pain of, learning, trying it every possible way until you get it right. And like, now you really, really know something.
Yeah. And it's funny too, those side discoveries. I don't know if we mentioned it last time I don't know if we spoke about it last time. I was watching Star Talk with Neil deGrasse Tyson, and he was talking about how Google or online searches did have a negative impact on learning, because when you'd go to a library, if you want to learn something, you want to go to a library. And you remember that the whole act, back in the old days when things were better, right? Back when you go to a library, you're looking up a book, you're looking up a subject. So you go through all the index cards, and you're looking through the index cards. And when you find that book, you also realize in that same section, there's a whole series of books connected to that subject. And you might have flipped past a couple of index cards and went, I wonder what that is. In the process of getting to that point, the process of exploring the beaten path, so to speak, you've made a ton of experiences. And honestly, Jeremy, I can say that I'm sure that at least 30 to 40% of everything I know today were unintentional. They were accidental discoveries, right? And where Google, and now further with AI and ChatGPT, which I just explored for the first time yesterday, is kind of interesting. And we can talk about that after, but it's bypassing exploration and getting straight to the source. Literally AI chat right now is restricting that discovery even more. I think that might be the handicap of AI in that regard, because you're not traveling off the beaten path. You're just going even more straight to the source. You're not even going to website searches. You're just going straight to some piece of information. I don't know. How do you feel about that?
I like to look back at history and just say, okay, Industrial Revolution.
Yeah.
People used to be farmers, and they were in their own towns, and they had, everybody that did all the things they needed were in their own city. And then the Industrial Revolution radically changed the planet, and suddenly people weren't living in the same town that their ancestors were. I'm a nomad, and I've moved 22 times in my life, and 9 of those have been cross country or international. And so I know what it's like to be a nomad and live all kinds of places to where I don't have a home anymore. Like, if you're like, where's home? I'm like,
it's in my suitcase.
Where my family is, which is with me, wherever. I don't have a place to call home. But anyhow, Industrial Revolution changed the world. And there was a lot of horrific things that happened with that, with labor and with pollution and there's all kinds of toxin and lead poisoning and all this stuff that happened as a result. But it also advanced our lives in the same way until, here we are 150, 200 years later, and it has balanced out to like the side of the Industrial Revolution has kind of balanced. But during our lifetime, we saw another revolution that I think is just as big as the Industrial Revolution, is this whole thing of the internet, and now with AI and the negatives of this, the pollution, so to say, to me is probably the exact topic, the loss of personal connection. The company that I was working for last was a company called Magnopus, and their whole idea was bridging the gap between the digital and physical world. That the guys who founded that company were my age, our age, and they had said, when we were kids, we had a very a world that was information poor but experience rich. And kids these days have a very information rich and experience poor.
It's poor. Yeah.
It's just kind of flipped. Oops. And trying to find that balance of making sure that you're going out and you're actually living life. And like you said, if you go straight to, I'm just going to use this tool, I'm just going to use AI to do art instead of actually doing it myself, there's going to be something that's lost in the experience. You can still choose. Like if you say, well, AI is going to take over art, so I give up. I put down my iPad and my Apple Pencil and my Photoshop and I'm done. It's like, well, that's your loss. I love creating art. And even if I lose my job due to computers taking it over, I love it so much and I learn so much. I'm going to keep doing it till the day I die, just because I love it. And I want people to have that joy either way. People didn't stop doing painting when photography came around. So AI, where is that at? What's going to happen? I don't know what's going to happen. I keep going back and forth. In fact, I had a video on my YouTube channel about my thoughts on AI, and then I took it down because I started learning more, and I'm like, no, I don't think this is the full picture of my full thoughts. I'm going to just pull this off for a bit and let it sink in. I mean, all I know is that I don't want to be freaked out. So I try to lower my stress and not get into panic, because everything in our world right now makes money off of your panic. So I try not to watch the news so much because I can't change what's happening on the other side of the world, so what I can change is the people within my life and how I treat them and what I do with my time. And I would rather spend my time creating and the joy of creating than panicking over what might happen.
And it's just such a it's funny. I was watching, I'm glad we kind of redid this because I had a chance to watch Tom Scott's video on AI yesterday.
Me too. Yeah, I watched it yesterday. Yeah, it was a good one.
I love that guy. Yeah. And he was basically, from a programmer's perspective, how basically it had solved this rather substantial problem automatically. It AI'd a programming problem he had with Google with his Gmail for a long time and stuff. And he said, it is so big, kind of like the final thing was, I don't know where it's going to be. Maybe it'll taper off. Maybe we've gone over the big hump so far. Maybe we're just at the very root of the big growth. I can definitely say, even after exploring with ChatGPT for the first time yesterday and just checking out a couple of things, I did a couple like game searches for Lucas, or I did some like herniated disc things for me just to see what it would say. It gave me some very quality information,
Interesting.
Like, all with this simple chat. When it comes to art and AI, it's interesting. Either it's so overwhelmingly huge, as Monty Python would say, "Oh Lord, you are so big, so absolutely huge. We are so very impressed down here, I'll tell you." But like, if it's so huge that it's just too big for me to emotionally grasp it, perhaps. But to me, I legitimately feel at the moment zero fear about artificial intelligence. I kind of, through the evolution of my life, see it as that next big exciting thing. And as everything in life, we're like bacteria. We evolve, we adapt. And when we find ourselves dealing with a force that's far beyond our control, it's sink or swim. I can either sit there and ruminate and stress and panic and hit all the conspiracy theory buttons, or I can say, okay, this is the new reality. What next? How do I use it? How do I move from it? And it's really I'm just waiting for my next cue, right? In the meantime, to me, art is not just an image on a page. Art is an expression. It's communication. What are you communicating? As you said in your video, right? The foundation of art is what you communicate to people. And to me, communication is really what I do, whether it's being in drawing form or musical form or verbal form. I'm communicating to somebody, and I'm experiencing the physical activity of creating art. And to me, that to me is what matters. What AI does in terms of impressive imagery, hey, shit, I've been looking at impressive images for the last 50 years. Very indifferent to cool looking images. To me, it's the artist and the artist's accomplishment and what they're communicating on a personal level matters. So who you are as a person, if you were a jerk, I don't care how gorgeous your art is, I associate I would associate that negative personality to your art. But now because I know you, and because you're not quite the jerk I thought you were, less jerky, and I look and you go, okay, maybe I'll give it a chance, you know? I'm kidding, no. Your stuff is beautiful, but there's a human connection to what you do, and I learn through your humanity, not just through what you create. And that might be my very hippie attitude towards art. Maybe I'm just ignorant to the grandeur of this issue. Don't know, don't care. There's not a whole lot I can do otherwise. You know, I can't.
I'm gonna embrace the hippie side of it. Just go. I don't care. You know, if being an artist means you're more connected to people, then great. My mom was a hospice nurse, so she only cared for patients who were guaranteed going to die. And she said in her entire career, she never met one person who said, "I wish I had worked more." What they always said, you know, their regrets at end of life is, I wish I had connected with my kid. I wish I had forgiven this person. I wish I had done something. It was always relational, you know, the end of life moment and go, well, if I'm going to learn from that now, I don't want to wait until I have cancer to learn this. I want to just go, am I spending my life doing the things with the people that I love and showing grace to them like I want to have for me, you know, and forgiveness and kindness and generosity, you know, can I do that day to day for me? Because I would rather do this at 50 years old than 85 years old. And then only realize that in the last, you know, 2 months of life. I'm like, nah, I want to live this way now. I want to make my choices about where I go and, you know, what I do in my career. Everything should be about, no, I want to live for sure. It's always that human connection.
100,000%. And it's funny you're saying that because the older I get, the more I listen to older people in their 70s and 80s and 90s, you know, much older people, and I pay attention to the ones I like. I pay attention to the ones that matter to me and that influence me. And it's always for emotional reasons. It's always for personality reasons. And the older I get, the more I realize kindness and compassion and empathy and listening, being there with somebody and listening to them and experiencing relationships and not numbing yourself through the whole experience are the qualities that make a person missed. They're the qualities that make a person loved. It's what forges real lasting relationships. It's what people talk about when you have your ankh and you're mummified, you know? And to me, it's really when it comes down to it, you know, I've done drawings, I'm gonna have some cool art to put on the walls and everything like that. If I look at a Chuck Jones drawing, and there's one that's incidentally right on the front door, right by Beauty's restaurant in Montreal. If you ever come to Montreal, come to Beauty's. It's this old landmark, old 50s place. And right by the side of the door, there's a genuine sketch framed right by the door by Chuck Jones because he used to go there all the time. And it's his carrot burgers, you know, the guy who makes the best carrot burgers in town. And I'm looking at it, and I'm looking at that drawing, and I lost my mind because he's one of my, you know, all-time heroes, Chuck Jones. Of course. And I'm looking at that drawing. What mattered to me about that drawing? Was it how well it was drawn? Yeah, it was well drawn. No, it's that there's a lifetime of it. There's an old man's life in those eyes, in those stretched black pupils. There's a guy who's gone through herniated discs. You think, Adam, you're going through some crap? No, I went through it 1,000 times. His body has aged. He's gotten old. He's lost his ability to, you know, do the high jump and fight Mike Tyson in the ring. Nobody gives a crap about that. But when he expresses himself, there's a real human, there's a soul, there's a smile, there's a kindness, there's a twinkle in the eye. And that's the stuff you remember. That's the stuff that matters. Nobody, in the end, plenty of people could draw just as good as him or better. But it's what he represented as a person, and all of that has to do with how he treats people, how he talks to people, what he communicates, how he communicates it, what matters to him on an emotional level, and that's what makes people miss him. That's what makes people love him. And if you're going to plan anything for your retirement, I'd say plan yourself emotionally for your retirement, right? Me having a herniated disc right now, and me dealing with this issue I've had it, you know, recurring over years and years. I realized, speaking to my physio today, it's been like over 25 years I've been herniating myself, you know, I didn't realize it. But yeah, it kind of clicked today. I was like, yeah, this happens all the time. But now that it's been a 6-month issue, and now that I'm realizing I've experienced for the last 6 months what it feels like to be slowed down. No, Adam, you're not going to the gym. You're not doing the stair climber for 6 hours. You're not going for a sprint. No, you're going to take it easy. You're going to rehabilitate yourself back into gentle movement. I'm realizing my body will slow down and it will physically change. So to compensate for that weakness, I have to strengthen other facets of myself. And the things that I'm grateful for, the things that I'm happy and proud about right now, sitting here talking to you, is that my channel has developed into a channel, and my school has developed into a school where I'm making really genuine connections. There's no bull about that. That I'm approaching it from a more humanitarian level. That I'm not just trying to be a cool, popular YouTuber. You know?
Right.
Yeah. And that, I think, is something that's what I don't mind leaving behind on my channel as a legacy, so to speak. Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't have to do with page views. It has to do with connections, for sure.
Yeah.
I remember, and I think I brought this up last time we talked. If not, I think it's a fascinating story. There was a book I read that really influenced me, and I can't even remember the name of the book, and I don't even remember the content of the book. I just remember the introduction to it. And this guy was saying in the introduction, you know, all my life I wanted to be a dentist because, you know, they get paid a doctor's salary, but they deal with the easy stuff, you know, just people's teeth. But he's like, my mother encouraged me to say, someday robots are going to figure out how to fix teeth and they won't need dentists anymore.
Yeah.
You need storyteller because that will be here forever. You know, it is something, and it's like, oh, that's a really great perspective. I think growing up for me, wanting to do movies, there's a lot of people in my life that were like, no, you need to be a doctor, you need to be a lawyer, you need to be a, you know, an engineer of some kind or whatever, and all promoting these things that actually change society and help people.
Yeah.
You know, movies is just distraction. And like, but when I think about it, what does it mean to be alive? As a human being, we are social creatures, and the way we survive is to share our stories. And that is, to me, the essence of what humanity is. Like, I could go live in the forest and I could just chop down trees to build stuff, and I could, you know, find my food and forage for it, but that's not much of a life. It's the connections that I have that make us last. So like, ooh, to me, storytelling is everything. That is what we do. So if AI comes in and changes it, well, then I just got to focus in on the most important thing. What story am I telling? Because I'm going to keep telling my story. I'm not going to let a computer tell the story for me. I'm going to tell my story through a computer. You know, and just like, it's all about story and connection.
You know what? And just kind of to put a cap on it, because I realize we ramble, man. This is awesome. To put a cap on it, to add to that, and it kind of ties into something Bobby Chu said years ago. I was at a schoolism workshop because they hosted it at the school I taught at, and somebody had asked him, you know, how do you make a name for yourself as an artist, as a professional? And he said, whatever you do needs to bring value to somebody else. You always think about the value you're bringing somebody else. And if you think of any PIXAR film, if you think of any YouTube video you've created, if you think about any story that's ever mattered to you, you are drawn to and sharing in that experience with somebody because what that person's sharing is bringing you value. When I watch a PIXAR film, I'm not just watching it to be mindlessly entertained. There is a personal lesson. There's a takeaway for me at the end of a film. And you can always distinguish that difference. A story that matters to me, that impacts me, that moves me, that it creates that adrenaline moment in your life where you go, oh, I'll never forget that. It's because it marked a moment in my life when it mattered. And to anybody out there who's listening, you know, and you're trying to figure out how can you make a name for yourself, if you're just standing out in the middle of the street and saying, look at me, look at me, look at me, the attention that you get and the appreciation you'll get will be finite because there's only so much you can give to another person. But when you're thinking about how your efforts are contributing to the quality of somebody else's life in a positive way, in a meaningful way, that's when you're going to make more meaningful connections, right? And that's when you'll be valued. That's just basically where your contributions would be more valued. If I was to have a nice poetic hippie final word there. Yeah.
Our Zen ending to this. Yes, totally agree. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time. This is a lot of fun. And I consider you a friend, even though we've only chatted, you know, for a couple of hours total. So,
Yeah.
instant bond there. Maybe 6 months from now or something, after I've got my channel going, maybe I'll interview you and put it on my channel, and can kind of like swap back and forth and see what we've learned in a year. See if the world is just swarming with robots around the air, and we're just mindless batteries.
Will be robots, Jeremy.
We will be robots. They'll have extracted
AI,
our
man,
brains.
our AR. We're going to just get head replacements very, very soon. Expect
One thing I haven't heard people say is, "Are we the AI?"
Well, as Neil deGrasse Tyson, he said, it's not about proving or whether or not the world is a simulation. It's not proving if we live in a simulation. It's proving that we don't live in a simulation. Right? But listen, just for anybody listening, keep tabs on Jeremy, on his channel on Light Ponderings, because he's building a very exciting mentorship, and one which I can't wait to check out for myself. I'm a huge fan. Thank you so much for joining me. I really, honestly, I consider it an honor. This is a timestamp in my life I'm never going to forget, and I really appreciate that.
Well, thank you. Likewise.
You're very welcome. You're very welcome.